everybody. Welcome to Navigating Betrayal Live, webinar, podcast, and YouTube channel. I'm your host, KayLee Dunn, betrayal navigation coach, betrayal trauma therapist for over a decade, and admin of this free group, Humans Navigating Betrayal. Stick around for a short Q&A at the end. Today, I'll be discussing 3 types of relapse and why it's important that you, the betrayed partner, know the difference. Okay, so there are 3 different types of relapse, and that is because just physically stopping the betraying behaviors is not full recovery. Now, saying the term recovery does bring in this concept of addiction language, right? Which is kind of the historical way that we've thought about all of these betraying behaviors, whether that's pornography use that's hidden, an emotional affair, complex use of social media and other websites, or physical affairs or physical one-night stands, that sort of thing. Whatever that betraying behavior is, historically, we talked often if it was serial or done often, using the language of addiction. We know now that it's far deeper than just the tolerance of a substance, this dopamine and serotonin hit. And also, I think we, meaning the mental health world, but I think as betrayed partners, we all knew that it was deeper than this, right? And that there's far more going on than just someone who is impulsively acting out, but that there are many layers that include often mass amounts of deception, lack of integrity or value set, and emotional dysregulation, as well as abusive attitudes and behaviors. And now, thankfully, more and more betrayed partners like yourselves or ex-partners are speaking out on these topics. And so we're recognizing, and the mental health world is now taking that more into consideration, hopefully more and more. I'm still going to use the term relapse because it still fits in terms of they're doing a betraying behavior, whatever that is, right? An attitude. And maybe that goes away for a time and then it comes back. And there are 3 different types of relapse. So that term relapse still kind of fits in the sense that it's coming back, right? So whether you see your partner or your partner sees themselves as an addict, or as if they don't see themselves that way or you don't see them that way, this can still be applicable. So one type of relapse is the most obvious, which is the physical relapse. That is where they're going back into the behavior. They're looking at pornography again, or they're meeting with prostitutes, or they're talking to the affair partner or a different affair partner. They're doing the emotional affair again. Those behaviors are happening again. That's a physical relapse. That's one type. A second type is a mental relapse. This is before the physical relapse has occurred. There's a mentality or a thought process in which they're fantasizing, they're glorifying, they're making plans, they're thinking through how to start up the behavior again. Whether that period of sobriety or abstinence or whatever you want to call it occurs for a short amount of time just because they're trying to stop themselves, or because of boundaries that you've set, or a long amount of time, there can be a mental relapse. And that's that phase where they're starting to think in ways that is going to lead to that physical relapse. The third type is an emotional relapse. An emotional relapse is where their emotions, their feelings are dysregulated, or in other words, we talked about that a little bit last time, or in other words, they are not managing their emotions within their window of tolerance. And as such, they're at a higher likelihood of going into that mental relapse, starting to fantasize about the behavior, and then the actual physical relapse. So all of these are a part of the relapse process. And if you're with someone who says, oh, well, I quit, so I'm fine now, this is why that's often not the case. And then they're not fine now, that maybe they can stop themselves from the physical relapse for a time, but you're going to see mental relapse behaviors. So objectification, lusting, treating especially other women or men with disrespect, and a lack of kindness. And you're going to see this emotional just kind of roller coaster all over the place. Now, why do you, as the betrayed partner, need to know the difference? There's a couple of reasons. One is your intuition is going to pick up on emotional or mental relapse. It's going to. And that is going to be a flag to you that things don't feel right. Because you may be experiencing big emotional responses, you might think immediately, oh, he's acting out or she's acting out because I'm sensing the emotional relapse or the mental relapse. They may or may not be doing that. What's important here, though, isn't have they relapsed, although, of course, for your physical safety, that is important. Don't get me wrong. But really, it's more, is this emotional behavior, is this mental relapse behavior, does that work for me in this relationship? Because if it doesn't, it may as well be a relapse. And this is something that you can make requests around and set boundaries around. There is some truth to the reality that this person that you're with, potentially, I don't know who they are, each person watching this video, or listening to this later, has behaved in a certain pattern for a very long time, especially in regards to pornography use, which often happens or begins as a coping mechanism in early adolescence. And so what happens when we take away that coping mechanism, this is not an excuse, zero excuse, is that we'll see this emotional and mental relapse. What's important to recognize here, and I think that has become kind of mixed up in the way that therapists talk about it and the way that partners of betrayal have been made to believe, is that if they're not physically relapsing, then success, right? If they're not physically relapsing, you can just come to expect that they're going to have these emotional and mental relapses and that you have to just kind of put up with that. So two things can be true. One is that in the early phases of recovery, they are going to go through a time where they don't have those skill sets yet. They haven't learned how to manage their mental and emotional relapses yet. And for a time, that is to be expected. However, that is not something that you have to sit around and take. No emotional or mental abuse is okay ever. You absolutely can have boundaries around those from the very beginning. And you absolutely can have expectations and lines that you draw in the sand around how you're treated and around their dysregulation. And if you were here for our last live, or you want to go back in and watch our last podcast or YouTube video on this topic, you'll know that these type of things, these dysregulations, are things that you can set boundaries around and create protection space for yourself around. It's also good for you to know, because you may, from your intuition, start sensing from this other person this emotional or mental relapse, and you may spiral or have a kind of go down the rabbit hole of searching for something on the computer or something on his phone. And you think, okay, I'm sensing these red flags. I know that I'm not safe, but why am I not finding anything in his devices or her devices? Well, absolutely, that can be that they're just really good at hiding it. But another reason might be that your intuition is picking up an emotional relapse. You're ahead of the curve, right? You're ahead of that physical relapse. You sense that coming down the pike. And so what you need to know is that that's enough. That feeling of I'm not okay with X, Y, and Z behavior or attitude or energy is enough. And so we set our boundaries around not what we're told by a betraying partner who has a history of lying, but instead by what we see, what behaviors they're showing over time, and the energy or the emotional sense that we get as well. Now, they're still human beings. They're allowed to have emotion. They're allowed to be disappointed and sad and have a full range of emotion. They're allowed to do that. And when that becomes, again, outside of their window of tolerance, a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of blame, denial, all of those sorts of things, those are all those red flags that pop up that say, whoa, this isn't working for me. And you can set your boundaries around how you feel, not necessarily always around, it's not about controlling the behavior, as much about navigating or managing your own environment. So again, those are those three different types of relapse: the emotional relapse, the mental relapse, and the physical relapse. And why you need to know that is because your boundaries can be around all three of these. Now, you may not be able to go out and know exactly what they're thinking or feeling, but you may be able to sense how you feel and use that as your guide for your boundary setting. Okay, if you have any questions, I'll stick around to answer those. But I want you to know that this painful, devastating experience that you're going through right now is legitimate. You are not oversensitive. You are not crazy. And that these really painful responses to these types of behaviors in your intimate relationships or a past intimate relationship hurt for a reason. And it's because they're caused by an attachment rupture. And if you're still hurting, even though the relationship has ended, or the relationship is improving, or it's still tough and you're in that messy middle, you make sense. And that there is hope for you to live that big, beautiful life that you want to live. There are steps that you can take, and that you have all those skills, or you have inside of you the tools that you need. You may just need a little bit of direction to use them. So thank you so much for sticking around and being here today, and we will see you later.